Hi, I'm Mark Cleghorn and welcome to the Photographer Academy, and in this film we're going to be looking at my clock and compass style. This is a technique that I can train you with to pretty much turn up anywhere, position your lights in a kind of a brief second, set them up quickly and get the great images without even any real thought. Some would say it's painting by numbers, or photography by numbers in this case, but you know what, if it makes it easy for you, if you can guarantee the results each time, it's a great place to start. From there you can develop it into your own techniques, your own kind of styling of your photography and what most suits the client in front of you. Now, as you can see here, I'm on the clock. At least I'm green screened. I hope by this time they've put the clock in position. And what we're going to be looking at, the fundament to this is to understand one thing, that the camera is always positioned at the 6 o'clock position. Okay, it can never move at this point when we're looking at studio flash or speedlight flash, where we have the ability to move the lighting in the scene. So the first thing we're going to do is position the camera in the 6 o'clock position. Once that's there, we've got the ability to move the lighting around the subject, who of course is in the middle of the dial, to then create the dynamic images or the more classic images, depends on what we're trying to achieve. Now, as far as the zones are concerned, we're going to talk about the dark zone, which is behind me, and we're going to talk about the hot zone, which is in front of me. So as far as the hot zone is concerned here, basically, we know this is pretty much going to make a client look good. They're going to be illuminated to some extent. It's going to put good light onto their face. If we're lucky, it's going to create some shadow on the opposite side. Whereas on the back of me, we're really going to create the dark zone, but it's in the dark zone where all the images really start to come alive in impact. In other words, things like profile shots or kind of muscular physiques. When I'm looking to kind of really bring an edge to the light, pretty much my lights are going to be in the dark zone. And the dark zone is everything from 3 o'clock back around me to the 9 o'clock position. Whereas in the hot zone, of course, we're working from the 3 o'clock position around to the front towards camera and back around towards the 9. And that's the basics of this. Then we've got to start to think about where we position the lights within the scene to create the best photograph for the subject that we have in front of us. So where do we start? Well, we always start with one light. Why? Because we can overcomplicate any setup by beginning to introduce a second, a third and a fourth light without truly understanding what the one light technique is going to be able to do for us. So let's talk about the more complementary style of the lighting before we get into the impact zones. Now, as a rule of thumb, when I was growing up in the world of photography, man and boy as it were, I was taught the 45-degree position. Now, I got it, but so many photographers struggled with where is 45 degrees and so on. So this is where I began to devise the clock style of lighting. As I said, you can arrive pretty much anywhere. You know where your light is going to be positioned in relative where the camera and the background is going to be. So with the camera position being 6 o'clock all the time, pretty much we know the background is 12 o'clock at that point. So the subject on the middle of the dial, and to create a good direction to the light, really what we want to be doing is positioning the key light, the main light source, at the 4 o'clock position. As soon as it starts to drift around towards the 5 o'clock position, it starts to fill more of the wrap, the part of the face here that would be in shadow with the light at 4 o'clock, starts to then creep around more and more towards the side and the ear specifically when we get to 5 o'clock. And then if we got to the 6 o'clock position, basically the light is coming full onto the subject, given a flat lighting technique. And we all know that flat lighting is fat lighting, so it will physically increase the size of the subject. So with the 4 o'clock position, there's going to be different ways that we're going to position that light to slightly change the effect. We'll talk about that in future films. However, here, the whole point of it's to light one side of the face. By doing that, it will create a shadow on the opposite side. And by creating the shadow, that's our first point of 3 dimension. So if I want to light the subject from this side, we're looking at 4 o'clock. If I want to light the subject from the opposite side, it would be at the 8 o'clock position, remembering all the time that 3 o'clock is here and 9 o'clock is here, and the camera is positioned at 6 o'clock. So once we accept that the best position for our key light is going to be either at the 4 o'clock position or the 8 o'clock position, and that we know that the closer we get to 6 o'clock, it will flatten the light source and hence fatten the subject, we start to then realize that as soon as we start to move the light to either the 3 o'clock position or the 9 o'clock position, the light that was allowed to wrap onto the opposite side So if it was at 4 o'clock, we'd have the light beginning to light the subject here. Shadow would start to create here. As soon as we start to move the 3 o'clock position in, then all of a sudden, any light that was allowed to wrap around onto the shadow side of the face is going to quickly disappear. And this will start to bring a lot more energy and impact to the image, so a lot more kind of mood. So for a male kind of editorial style of photograph, where I'm looking to actually have a kind of really powerful kind of looking shot, then a one light technique is great for that. And the split light is really good. Once I start to kind of want to bring it kind of a little bit more edge to the image, then I can start to move the light even further around from the 3 o'clock position to the 2 o'clock or the 1 o'clock. Now, the 2 o'clock position is probably the kind of the position that we use most when we start to get the subject to look off camera. So in other words, if I left it at the 3 o'clock position, all it would do is start to kind of flatten the face in here. So we need to start to move that light around towards, as I said, the 2 o'clock. And the opposite would be the same if the light was coming in from this side. Once we start to move the light into the 1 o'clock position, it starts to become more of a hair light. It starts to become more of a separation light. 2 o'clock will work as separation as well, but it will start to actually fill, or spill, I should say, onto the side of the cheek and at times spill on towards the nose. Watch out for that, because that can really make it look bad on the finished image. Exactly the same on the opposite side as well. But when we start to put the light on the 12 o'clock position, this tends to be a kind of a background light. So in other words, its job is to illuminate the background that is behind us in some way. And there are times when, in fact, that light would be switched around to point back towards my back here, and it would start to kind of give me a rim light effect around the whole of the subject. But that's a kind of a desired taste. So with the one light technique, decide exactly what is going to be the position, whether it's going to go for a softer, more natural kind of look at the 4 o'clock, whether you need to actually flatten the light for beauty work or a bit of fashion, bringing it around towards 5 or then towards 6 o'clock for the pure beauty style of lit image, or for the more of the impact shot with the kind of the physical kind of energy that we need at times to bring out tonality in a body, kind of crossing the light across the body to create the muscle tone and so on, or to just add separation to put the client in a three-dimensional way away from the background. So let's recap. 6 o'clock is going to give me a flat and fat light, but is often used in beauty. 5 o'clock is a kind of a midway between the kind of the direction to the light and kind of flattening out the light itself. We don't often use that unless it's a big group, perhaps. Then we've got the 4 o'clock position, or the 8 o'clock position is the most complementary position for the flash. Why? Because it's going to create some shadow on the opposite side of the face. At 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, it's going to be part of the impact zone, so it's going to start to light one side and give complete shadow to the other. But of course, when we start to move the subject's face, we're allowing some of that light to start to wrap around whichever way the subject's going to look. Once we start to move it into the 2 o'clock or the 10 o'clock position, it's going to be a little bit more in that dark zone, that impact zone, so it's perfect for more energy, a kind of an accent light at times. Be careful though, if you use it there as a hair light, it'll start to spill onto the cheek and the nose. It's going to make it look bad. That's why we always want to position the hair light, the separation light, at the 1 o'clock position or the 11 o'clock position, because that is just going to kind of touch the hair, touch the shoulders, and help separate the client. And then, of course, with that 12 o'clock position, what it's going to do is separate us completely from the background by giving some illumination to the background itself. So when we start to introduce the second light, this is where it can all go wrong or really all go right. For this kind of little bit of the demo, we're going to kind of think about the light being fixed. In other words, the key light. Our number one light is going to be fixed at the 4 o'clock position, or of course for you, if you wanted it on the opposite side, it'd be fixed at the 8. But I'm going to refer to this now at the 4 o'clock position. So the key light's job, as I've said, is to illuminate the one side of the face and then allow a little bit of the face to actually go into shadow, but allowing some of that light to wrap around. That's why we use big soft boxes, to allow the light, instead of the harshness, to just kind of light an area and then go black. We then use a soft box to help us wrap around the three dimension to the light of the face, from the highlight through to the shadow, that lovely tonality going through. So we're going to fix our key light there at the 4 o'clock position. Now, at this stage, it's also worth to just touch on for a second about the height of that light, because really what we wanted to do all the time is create a 2 o'clock position in the eye. So in other words, if I was looking straight ahead here and I had my light at 4 o'clock, then this light coming down towards me here is creating a 2 o'clock catch light in the eye itself. If we don't create that 2 o'clock catch light in the eye, it's not going to drop the shadow down from the nose to meet the lip line here, and that's what we're trying to achieve. If it's at kind of a 3 o'clock position in the eye, you're going to find the shadow is going to go across the nose, and it's going to make it look quite strange because the triangle is going to go from the top of the nose to the base of the nose and then up. Whereas if we used it lower down the scale, you know, around about the 4 o'clock upward position, then you're going to start to see the triangle go upwards. It's going to be very, very confusing. So in other words, what we've got there is a two-dimension clock. We've got a one-dimension clock, i.e. on the floor. Then we've got the second dimension, which is the eye itself, where we position. So our key light is positioned at the 4 o'clock position here, and its height is enough to give me a 2 o'clock catch light. It was on the opposite side, it would be in the 8 o'clock position, and it would be giving me a 10 o'clock catch light in the eye. That's the little brightness that we actually see where the kind of the lamp is giving off its shape and so on. Secondary light, what are we doing with it? Well, we've got to decide on what it's going to do. Is it going to be a fill light? Is it going to be a hair light? Is it going to be light in our background? If we've only got 2 lights to play around with, we've got to make those decisions as photographers. Now, if it's a 2-light setup for me, and basically all I'm going to be photographing is kind of a half length or a 3/4 length image, perhaps I've got a reflector around that I can kind of use to kind of fill in a little bit. So I'll avoid the secondary light being used as a fill light. However, if I was using a big group here, perhaps the most important part to me is to make sure I do fill in all the detail, in other words, relieving some of the information in the dark clothing and the shadows themselves. So then I would actually think about the secondary light, in other words, in this time, the fill light being positioned either behind camera or towards the same side as the key light. So in other words, we've got the key light at 4 o'clock, and then we'd have the fill light around about the 5 o'clock position. If it was a very big studio we'd have, then basically the fill light would be at the 6 o'clock position behind camera, because we want it to be a wash of a light across the whole image. But we'll check out another film on that one, I promise. So that's it as a fill. If I wanted to add it a little bit more of a dynamic, I could move that light now around towards what could be my 2 o'clock position here. And at that point, it will start to be an accent light. It'll start to give me a little bit of an edge around the subject, add a little bit more light to the arm, a little bit more light around the side of the face. But as I've already mentioned, if we allow this light to be uncontrolled and start to spill onto the nose, it can look really, really bad. So be careful if you're using it for that kind of position. Then we really want to use it in the 1 o'clock for separation. So in other words, we're moving it around again to the impact zone, or this dark zone, and all its job is to highlight the hair around the side of the body as well. Now, in the classics, we always keep the lights on the same side. If we don't keep the lights on the same side, they start to oppose each other. But in fashion, we start to cheat when we look at a hair light, and instead of it being at the 1 o'clock position, we would tend to actually put it into the 11 o'clock position to be in the kind of the opposite side, to just give that little bit of a separation around the hair in case they began to merge in towards the background. Or of course, as I've said, if I wanted to use that secondary light just as my background light, it could be positioned behind the subject here, pointed towards the background. The brightest point would be coming out from behind the shoulder blades, so around about actually in the mid here, instead of getting a halo around the head. We want to avoid that, of course. Finally, we could actually bring it in from the side to kind of add some light shafts across here, or just give a gradation across the background perhaps. But what we're really doing is thinking what that second light is doing for us. Unless we make those decisions, we're never going to create the photograph that we're trying to create. With 3-light setups, again, we've got those choices. Now, as a rule of thumb, again, remember, we're keeping our key light at the 4 o'clock position. What's our second light going to do? Well, the first thing, let's say we want it to create, is that separation. So in other words, I'm going to use it as a hair light. So I've positioned that to the position 1. Now, if I'm going to do a group, perhaps I want that fill light to act as the fill. So that is going to be positioned in the kind of the 5 o'clock position on the clock, and that will then allow me to have a 5 o'clock, a 4 o'clock, and a 1 o'clock light position that we have here, and that will create a good separation throughout the whole image and a good three-dimensional look. If I wanted to get away without the fill light, of course, I could then use the third light to illuminate my background. So either in the 12 o'clock position right behind subject, or kind of coming off from one side to give me the illumination. Remember to keep the brightest point of the background light behind the shoulder blades itself. Likewise on this side, if I wanted to, the key light would be, as we said, at the 8 o'clock position. The hair light would be at the 11 o'clock position, and once more that background light would be obviously at the 12 o'clock position with it. Many things that we can do with light, but remember that one light should always do one job, and that is it. It shouldn't start to kind of contaminate with the other lights, otherwise it starts to get a confusing look on the image itself. So to give me a little bit more edgy kind of look with 3 lights set up, let's keep the key light at 4 o'clock still, but let's start to kind of have our first separation and accent light at the 1 o'clock position and kind of bring it back towards me. That will give me a good edge rim light. Let's put the third light as well around towards the 11 o'clock position here to have the kind of the same balance. So I'll basically kind of be rim lit all the way around with the key light at the 4 o'clock position to give me that light. Let's say I want to change that, but I only want to move the one light. Let's say we're going to move the 4 o'clock position light, and we want to bring a little bit more of a honeycomb on towards the face here. So that is when we can start to move that light into the 6 o'clock position. Perhaps it's going to be on a boom arm or something like that with a honeycomb on that will just light the face. So if I've got a male here and he's an athlete or a boxer, I've got these fantastic kind of accent lights coming through here that will separate them fully, especially against dark backgrounds. And then I've got this honeycomb that will give me some illumination of his face. And if I wanted to kind of soften that technique a little bit, I could start to move those accent lights at 1 o'clock and 11 o'clock instead to the 2 o'clock and the 10 o'clock position. In that case, they're going to start to add a little bit more light down towards the cheeks and down the sides of the arms as well to give us a little bit more detail there, but still perhaps keeping that honeycomb at the 6 o'clock position to give us some real power. Let's now develop onto 4 lights. Why 4 lights? Well, basically, that's where the kind of the classic studio is based around. So we've got our key light that we've talked about to create the three-dimensional kind of lighting on the face. We've got the fill light, which is positioned at the 5 o'clock position or around towards the 6 o'clock position. Depends how much we want to bring it around. And then we'll have that kind of separation light at 1 o'clock, which is acting as the hair light. And then we have that background light, of course, which is giving us that full three-dimensional look. And that's the kind of the basics to the 4 light setup in the classic studio. So to get an edgier kind of looking light with 4 lights, of course, we've got to decide on what the lights are doing and what their kind of job is. Let's kind of fix still our key light at 4 o'clock. But let's now kind of bring in more of a kind of a sports kind of physique kind of styling or an editorial kind of portrait with it. And let's get our kind of accent lights here at 2 and at 10 o'clock coming in towards the back and in towards the side. They'll also run some lighting coming down towards the edges of the kind of the cheek line here. They may even spill onto the sides of the nose a little bit. But it's okay. On this side, of course, we've got that 4 o'clock the key light that will still give me my good lighting kind of quality. These lights here, their job is to kind of give a real three-dimensional edge. What are we doing with the fourth light? Well, it could be a fill light behind camera position at the 5 o'clock position. It could be a honeycomb light, again, around about the 5 o'clock position coming in towards here. It could be a hair light, kind of an exaggerated halo light, so at the 12 o'clock position and above and behind me, coming back to kind of rim light around the top of my head and around the shoulders as well. And that's kind of a simple way of kind of what light is doing what. Think it through, even draw them out on a page to kind of have a plan of where you're putting the light in before anything else. So that's it, our basics into the clock and compass. And the reason we kind of talk about the compass part, we'll cover in another film. But the basics are the clock positions. The camera stays at 6 o'clock. The subject is in the middle of the clock. Then where we kind of position our main light will kind of give us the kind of real dynamic, the three-dimensional shape. All the other lights are either going to act as a fill light or a separation light. Bit of a tip to end with, really. We talk about, the key light being at the 4 o'clock position or the 8 o'clock position. Very rarely do we want two lights coming in from the front here. Very, very rarely. And if we start to do that, we start to flatten out the light, you're not going to get a good result at all. So remember, you either want that key light at the 4 o'clock position or the 8 o'clock position, and never together. See you next time. Bye-bye.